Okay, we're back in business. This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. Like 200 vehicles on the lot right now. Come and take one, whether it's a truck, whether it's an Edge, whether it's a used vehicle. Come on in, let me get something done for you. Lots of great deals, good interest rates, but it won't always be like this. So if you're in the market for a truck, new or used, vehicle, new or used, I am the guy to see at Norm at Oak Ridge Ford on Instagram. I'll take care of you like I've taken care of so many OGs and converts before. It is Sunday, September 24th, 2023. NJ and LDN, my man, MIB in Below. So it's been an interesting week in the world of hockey, the whole Mike Babcock thing. What a lunatic that guy is. But Brad Treliving and Sheldon Keefe coming together on this idea that William Nylander should play center for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We can talk about whether that's the right thing for the team on the ice, whether that's the right thing for showcasing a guy like number 88. Maybe it's a bit of both, but if it benefits the Maple Leafs, benefits him, and it makes us watching the Maple Leafs more enjoyable, I'm all for it. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Norman. You said come and take one of those vehicles at Oak Ridge Ford. You want them to pay for it too, so not take them. Okay, let's start with this. This is not anything new in terms of William Nylander playing up the middle. It's been experimented with since he came to Toronto in 2015 after he had left Modo in the Swedish Hockey League. I'm pretty sure his first shifts as a Marley were at center. He played center for Sheldon Keefe with the Marlies. He played center at times with the aforementioned Mike Babcock in Toronto. And when injuries had happened, he had moved to center. It's never worked. Now, the way Sheldon Keefe explained it, he said, well, there's a difference between you shifting to center from the wing and you starting training camp as a center and sort of working your way through it. We'll see. Do I think this is a permanent situation? No. But I do think what this is, they're going to give him every chance. They're going to say, okay, you want to play center? You think you're a center? Show us.
So he wants to play center. We know that. Well, that's his determination now.
I don't know that for sure, but he was drafted as a center. His dad was a center. He's a playmaker. He had, I think, 47 assists last year on the wing. His problem playing center has always been defensively. Defensively, he was below average. Now, you could say on the wing he is average now. He's better. He doesn't make as many mistakes as he used to. Lots of lapses. But there's a difference between making a mistake on the wing and making a mistake up the middle. Now, the other thing that's curious that Brad Treliving mentioned in the press conference in the media availability on Wednesday was that they're not moving John Tavares to the wing. They're playing Matthews, Tavares, and Nylander. Well, if that's the case, then somebody is going to be the third line center. And that's where the problem is, because none of those guys, because a third line center is basically, unless you're going with a 3-line offensive attack, none of them are shut down checking line centers. David Camp is that.
Right.
And that's what we had last year when, Ryan O'Reilly, when he comes over from St. Louis, he was the third line center because this is a guy who won best defensive forward, who won a Conn Smythe. He's a checking line center with a plus offense. So, he was the guy who was going to play third line and match up against Steven Stamkos or Braden Point or whoever against Tampa Bay. None of those guys. I mean, Tavares is an offensive center. He's not bad defensively. Right. Matthews is pretty good defensively, but he's primarily a goal scorer. And Nylander is, an okay defensive player and good offensively. Unless you're trying to create a matchup problem for the opposition, which might be the case, and you want 3 offensive lines, this is not a prototypical set. So that's where I think the problems lie. And that's why I think this is essentially an experiment and maybe like something that they do where they're going to move things around and he'll play a center one shift and wing the other shift. I don't know if it's permanent, but I have some theories about why they're doing this.
This is the Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. Jody Etheridge is in the chat. Michael Matthews is in the chat. David Hillman's here. Danny Grinnick. We appreciate the OGs. Converts, like the content, subscribe to the channel. New guys came in, Mike. I mean, Mr. Domi is listed as a center, but if he's going to play the wing, you need to make space for some new players to flank veterans like Nylander, like Matthews, like Tavares. You're opening up some opportunities for other, and with a guy like William Nylander, he's done so much offensively. Why not take this opportunity to elevate his game? And let's see as well, as a fan base, as a group of people who love the team, but most importantly, from his own perspective, just what he can do at this stage of his career. Obviously, defensive lapses in the past leave a lot to be desired when it comes to Nylander being a full 200-foot player, a guy who can play all three zones and play both ends of the ice. But look, man, I mean, you want the accolades, and you've already accomplished yourself as an elite offensive guy. Take your game to the next level, and allow some of these new guys to integrate and acclimate as part of the team, but contributing as opposed to being the centerpieces. That's what you'd want your top four guys to accomplish. And in this case, three of the top four are in center positions, with a guy like Marner basically playing anywhere he needs to play, and he'll always produce.
Well, I mean, that's what I think is partially the motivation here, because you come into training camp, and not to say that they're going to move William Nylander to center to accommodate Matthew Knies, but on the left side, you've got Domi, because Domi's not going to play center. You've got Domi, you've got Bertuzzi, and you've got Knies, and those players have to play, I think, to be most effective on a scoring line. So, because if you put Max Domi on a checking line with David Kampf, it's not going to work. But if you have three offensive lines, and then as the game evolves, then you elevate David Kampf from the fourth line and move Nylander to the wing, then that's something that they have some flexibility there. But I think that Matthew Knies is going to get every chance to make this team. I believe he will make this team. And I believe if he does make this team, he has to play in a scoring role, not like a top six because he's only 20 years old, but in a scoring role. He's not a checker. He's a big kid. He works well along the wall. But I think he's got to be in a scoring situation. He can't play fourth line because there's not enough minutes there. And I don't think he can be a checker. So if the solution there is to have three offensive lines, and that's what they'll do. They have started, and by no means does starting training camp mean this is going to be the line on the opening night. But I have seen over the years that Sheldon Keefe will put together a line that he thinks will be the line for opening night, and then sticks with that just to develop some chemistry. And at training camp, he had Bertuzzi playing with Matthews and Marner. Right. That's putting a lot of your eggs in one basket, but there are other effective lines. So if I had to guess, I think that will be your number one line going into the season opener on October 11th. They have Nylander playing, I think, tonight. I think Domi is in the lineup. I think the lineup was Domi with Nylander and Yarncroke, and then I'm assuming that they had Knies with Tavares. So I mean, things will move around, and Lafferty was the other guy. So I mean, things will move around. They'll experiment with things, but I do think that that's one of the motivations here, to have Nylander on a separate line, not playing on the wing, because you can put him back on the wing and he'll be effective. But they want to see if they can sort of broaden the offense and have a three-line offensive attack. What I do think is the motivation more than anything here, and I'm not saying purely showcase for a trade, but there are teams out there that if they trade for William Nylander, they want him to play center, because there is a dearth of centers out there. A team, not to say Boston, but I mean, a team like Boston just lost Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. If they traded for William Nylander tomorrow, William Nylander would be a center on the Boston Bruins. So we just lost Norm there for a sec. So there you go. We lost you there for a second.
Sorry about that, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. I have no problem talking.
Of course.
If if the Boston Bruins traded for William Nylander, he'd be their number one center because they need centers. But on the Leafs, they have they're fortunate enough that they have Tavares and Matthews, so they can play him on the wing. I do think what is being done here is that Brad Treliving went to Sheldon Keefe and they talked about it over the summer. And if we're going to pay William Nylander, we're not going to pay him $9.5 million, close to 10. We need to find out whether he can be the replacement for John Tavares when we move John Tavares to the wing in a year or so. If he's not, then either he's a guy we trade or he's an own rental and we let him walk at the end of the year. But I do think that that's part of the motivation here. It's a value assessment. Can he be that number two center? In my estimation, he cannot be. I think if he was a center, he would be a center by now. They would have given him the opportunity.
Did they want to give him this opportunity prior to what we're seeing demonstrated now?
Well, I think they. Well, I mean, yeah, it could backfire in the sense that he could be ridiculously successful, and then he says, "Oh, I can walk away and I can get $10 million someplace else." But they're taking him at his word that he loves Toronto and he wants to be in Toronto. So if he loves Toronto and wants to be in Toronto, then he'll take. Then they'll pay him and he'll take what they offer and he'll be here for 8 years. But if it's purely about the money and they don't think he's capable of playing center, I mean, he's capable, but is he going to be good? If he's not going to be good at playing center, then they're not going to pay him $10 million. So I think that, you could see this play out over the first month or two of the regular season. And then if he goes back to the wing, then he's either going to take the offer that they're offering, or they're going to let him. They're going to trade him, or they're just going to let him walk after a year. I don't believe that they should let him walk. I think they should trade him before he walks for nothing. But I don't know whether that's the assessment of Brad Treliving.
So there's two things going on here. Put Willie at center because it's going to benefit the team. Put Willie at center and let's see what he can do. If he wants all that money, do more than what you have done. Yeah,
no, I think there are two things at play right now. I think that they're trying to determine whether he's capable of being an effective second line center behind Austin Matthews. We know he can play the wing, but can he be that second line center? And if he can, then his value is increased, and then there is less of a reason to not pay him. If he after a couple months or a couple weeks, it doesn't work out, then they move him back to the wing.
I don't see how it doesn't work out. The guy's a professional. He knows how to play the game. Go do more than what you've done. If you be paid accordingly, go do more than what you've done. You've been on with this organization nearly 10 years now. Go do more than what you've done. And Mike, when we talk about how players fit in, Matthew Nyes, who's got to be in a scoring role, there's something to be said about working your way up to a position of advantage, right? It doesn't matter how much talent you have. Start at the bottom and work your way up. What is wrong with interchangeability? Right?
Well,
you have to shuffle the deck. You should be able to play anywhere. If you are typecast based on a limited skill set, things aren't going to work out for you in the long run with an organization that has aspirations to win.
Well, okay, he's a young player, so as you grow, as you gain experience, then you're going to be more multidimensional. But right now, all he has known is to be a scorer, is to be on a number one in line in college hockey, a scoring line with the U.S. Olympic team in Beijing, and when he played for the Leafs 3 games at the end of the regular season and in the playoffs, he played in a scoring role. So that's, I think, in terms of, putting him in a comfort zone, that is where I think, you're in the best shape there, putting him in that comfort zone. Eventually after a while. I mean, Nick Ritchie started on the second line, and then he ended up on the fourth line. And then he ended up with the Marlies. So it's like, and he's not Nick Ritchie. Nick Ritchie was 26 years old, and
Right.
Nyes is 20 years old. I'm just saying they want to put him in the most comfortable role that they can as early as they can to determine whether he can do that, and then then maybe like later on in the season he plays third line and he checks a little bit, or I think that's what they're doing. I think I would be dumbfounded if Matthew Nyes ends up with the Toronto Marlies. He would have to have an absolutely abysmal camp for him to do that. Now, we're going to talk about like their situation with their salary cap, because right now I don't know how they get under the cap. I mean, they're with the LTIR money.
Figure that out, Mike.
Well, yeah, Brandon Pridham is he's the guy who vetted the cap, so they'll find a way. But right now, I mean, it's tough to figure, because they're going to have over $10 million in LTIR money with Muzzin and Murray out of action, and there is a cap on how much money you can have on LTIR. So even after they put those guys on LTIR, they're a couple million over the cap at least. So they have to find a way. Now, will they go?
Desperation move Brad Treliving makes in the event they can't figure it out and have to pull the shoot on something or someone.
Well, the desperation move might be going with 20 players, going with bare bones. But that, if you go with 20 players, that means go with 6 defensemen. That means going with 12 forwards with no reserves now, and that means waiving players that maybe you didn't want to waive. So that means starting with 6 defensemen and waiving Connor Timmins, who could get claimed. I mean, there might maybe he won't get claimed, but he's been signed to a 2-year contract. He's making over $1 million, but he did have a good year last year in limited availability. But that would mean going with 6 defensemen. That would mean sending Martin Jones down to the Marlies, which I don't think is going to be a problem for them. It would also mean possibly waiving Ryan Reeves and putting Ryan Reeves on waivers. Nobody's going to claim him because he's got a 3-year contract.
Right.
It doesn't mean that he would have to play with the Marlies. Like, Wayne Simmons never played for the Marlies last year. He was waived. His money went down, but he was playing. Right. He was practicing with the Leafs. Now, I don't know if that was the reason that they that they brought him here. I mean, there are players that have waiver exemptions still, like Nick Robertson and Nyes. But
so Mike, management must have foreseen this position.
Yes,
and here we are. Like, it's not fun to talk about. This is what the organization has to bandy about it and find a solution for. The fun stuff for us is speculating on how William Nylander is going to turn out at center, and if it's greater than many of us think, the benefit will lie with opportunity financially for him, and then the additional byproduct is that the team we all watch and love so much will be better. Colin M. Nyes may thrive with JT, and Lafferty can be the speed guy who forechecks the puck into free space. I mean, this is all theoretical right now until the puck is dropped and we start to see how these guys figure themselves out. But it's nicer to have more talent to squeeze into circumstances as opposed to spreading an organized or a group of guys really, really thin, because it's saturated talent but doesn't permeate throughout the lineup. I don't think the Leafs have that problem, Mike, and we could talk about the defensive core and the goaltending tandem. But from top to bottom, this is a capable group. There are really no glaring holes. It's how do you configure this group and put guys like Matthew Nyes in a position to succeed. Give William Nylander an opportunity to elevate his game. Give some of these guys to reclaim some glory and others to sustain it. It is a pretty solid group. How will it all come together? And can dudes stay healthy and committed and devoted in order for the group to continue to push forward? And that's to have a great regular season and enter the postseason with even more determination than they did last year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the goaltending as we get closer to the start of the season. But in terms of the defense, the the dilemma or the uncertainty regarding the defense was sort of brought forth when Steve Simmons asked the question of Brad Treliving. He said, you looked at Vegas and you look at the defense that they had with, linchpin number one defensemen like Petrangelo, who at the Leafs were interested in getting, but he decided to go to Vegas, and Shea Theodore, and veteran guys like Alec Martinez, and size like Nick Hague. They had a big tough blue line that could eat minutes and that could protect the house. The Leafs don't have that. The Leafs have some good defensemen,
right?
But he asked Treliving whether he thought that the Leafs had a Stanley Cup defense, and Brad Treliving said, "We'll see."
Exactly.
Right, but that's not that. That does not exude confidence, and that's the whole point. The whole point is.
Sorry, Mike, and I hate to interrupt you, but guys, I'm in London, Mike's in Buffalo. I mean, what is that? 250 kilometers. So the magic of StreamYard and technology today brings us together, but sometimes we're going to step on each other. Like, what else is he supposed to say? And what can he do? We just spent 10 minutes talking about how the Leafs can't really spend any more money. They're above the cap. What the hell is he supposed to do right now other than to say we'll see?
Well, right. But what I'm saying is, if he believed it, he would say yes, but he doesn't believe it. So he'll say, we'll see. Now, he's not ripping his defense. He says, I like some of the pieces here. I like some of the players. But
it's a genuine answer, Mike.
I'm not saying it's not genuine. I'm saying it's honest. But when you say we'll see, that's not exactly an expression of confidence. I mean, I look at this defense right now, and I like Morgan Rielly, and I think Morgan Rielly would be a absolutely great number 2 on any defense in the NHL. The problem is he's a number 1 with the Leafs.
If you asked Aaron Boone if he has a championship lineup, and he said no, are you freaking out as a Yankees fan because he didn't bang the drums on behalf of a lackluster group 1 through 9?
Well, no,
what's wrong with telling the truth?
But he didn't say we'll see. He was. I mean, that's the problem here. It's like, okay, I would like if
it would be disingenuous to say otherwise, because we're talking about how this group is pretty adequate, but we'll see if it forms into something better. I think it's a, I don't think it's a political answer. I think it's a straight across answer that is ambiguous to a degree, but it's rooted in reality. We'll friggin' see. Does Gio play more than 2 games, or does he play 82 games plus a long playoff run?
I'm not. See, the thing is, maybe I'm not ripping Treliving for the answer.
I know that.
I'm basically saying here that he can't say no.
Right.
So he has to say something very deft, and that's fine. But nobody who looks at the NHL believes that the Maple Leafs have a defense that can win the Stanley Cup. That this is a work in progress. And how many years have I been saying, what do they need to do? Well, they need to reallocate funds, meaning spend less on forwards and spend more on defense. And, next year when they have a bunch of money dropping off the cap and they have more room, then they might be able to do that. And part of that might be William Nylander not being on this roster. Now, the thing is that if you do spend money on him, then you're in a situation where, okay, you're going to be spending the $5 million that TJ Brody, that if they don't re-sign him, or the, whatever money that they opens up on with Bertuzzi or Domi, what if they re-sign those guys? I mean, that you need to spend money, and you need to acquire defensive players that are as good as the players up front. That every team, you go through them, except for a team that had Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Every team over the last decade, LA with Doughty, the Blackhawks with Duncan Keith and Seabrook. When the Penguins won the one year, they had Letang. They all had number 1 defensemen.
Riley was supposed to be that guy. We know he's a number 2. It's availability, Mike. Who did the Leafs have within their grasp at their fingertips that could have altered this organization, but for some reason, or ineptitude caused them to lose that chance to have that number one who could have been the stalwart to push this group through. They're playing guys who they have at their disposal. And the thing is, with last year when they lost to the Panthers, in that limited series, did we pinpoint the defense and say it was all their fault? Like, we lamenting a defensive group that was patchwork and flying by the seat of its pants and ready to come completely undone during last season?
No. Well, I mean, again, as has been the case in playoffs past, the reason that they lost was because they couldn't score when they needed to score.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, the fault is of that, that core group that came through against Tampa, but didn't come through against Florida. They couldn't play sort of the rough and tumble game that the Panthers played. But yeah, I mean, no, I'm just saying, like, I look at the defense and there are some pieces that I like. I mean, one thing that we saw in the first few days of training camp is that Morgan Rielly is going to be playing more 5-on-5 because John Klingberg is going to be the point guy in the power play, at least to start the season. I called that from the minute that they signed him because John Klingberg has a big shot from the point. He is a power play quarterback. You need sort of like what Tyson Berry was with the Leafs. Right. When you have a power play quarterback like that, not to say Morgan Rielly is a bad power play quarterback, but the one thing that he lacks in his toolbox is the big shot. And
would you rank Klingberg amongst the players who have the most devastating howitzer, a power play changing shot?
It's above average. I mean, I don't think it's like best in the league, but I mean, I definitely think it's above average, and it gives them another weapon. And look, I mean, that's the thing. It's like Morgan Rielly is valuable as a 5-on-5 defender. So what do you need? If you have the ability to have John Klingberg, who's probably going to, in terms of 5-on-5 ice time, be in the bottom half of the Leafs defense. If you have the ability to play him 7 or 8 minutes on the power play, if they get 3 or 4 power play opportunities, 4 or 5 power play opportunities, then you take that because you need Rielly. Rielly is not a liability 5-on-5. Klingberg is. Klingberg is not a good defensive player. I mean, he's not Justin Hall bad. He's just never been a good defensive player. He's an offensive.
Erik Gustafsson with a shot.
No, he's better than Erik Gustafsson. Erik Gustafsson was just god awful defensively. He's been that way for ages. That's why I was so miffed at that deal. But I do think that that you're allocating the minutes on the power play to Klingberg, who can be just effective or more effective as a distributor and as a weapon on the power play. Right. And that allows you to play Rielly more 5-on-5. But where the issues are going to be here, it's like, okay, I believe Timothy Liljegren should by the end of the year be in the top 4. Right now he's starting with Giordano on the bottom pairing. I think he'll end up moving up. But that's like there's not a lot of depth in the organization on defense, and after Connor Timmins, who might be their number 7, but we don't know, then you've got Simon Benoit and Maxime Lajoie. Hardly Dennis Potvin and Larry Robinson. So it's like if they have injuries on the blue line, that's going to be make an even more of a weak spot more weak.
This is the Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. I'm your guy to see about your next vehicle at Norman Oak Ridge Ford on Instagram. Mike writes for hockeybuzz.com. Mike, what's your latest?
Well, I mean, the latest obviously is pumping up the Convo and Off the Post radio for today. But yesterday, I'm continuing to go through our top prospects list. We're getting into the top 5, and obviously guys like Matthew Nyes and Niemela, who are young players who are going to play. Niemela will play for the Marlies. I think Nyes is going to be in the NHL this year. Are players on that list? I mean, right now everything now is the opening of training camp and the opening of the preseason, which is today in Ottawa and tomorrow in Toronto against Ottawa. Obviously, with like 60, 65 players in camp. You're going to have, like today, it's basically the Toronto Marlies with like 5 or 6 NHLers, and
Right.
tomorrow will be the opposite, and it'll be the same with Ottawa. They'll probably have 3 or 4 NHL players, and I think these teams actually do themselves a little bit of a favor. They want the home team to win, so the Leafs are like, okay, we'll send Nylander, we'll send Domi, but all the Senators are gonna load up on their good players, and tomorrow the Leafs are gonna have Tavares and Matthews in the lineup. But I mean, we have some things to learn about this team between now and the beginning of the regular season, but I don't think that there are many spots up for grabs. It's going to be mostly combinations. It's going to be, I mean, I think the only, debate might be, where players play. If they go with Nylander, Matthews, and Tavares up the middle, then Pontus Holmberg starts with the Marlies.
Right.
If they move Nylander to the wing, then Pontus Holmberg is your 4th line center. So that's where, I mean, I think it's just going to be a lot of feeling out, a lot of seeing what combos work, and that's interesting. But there's going to be a lot of sort of meaningless hockey over the next 6 or 7 days.
And that's the thing about this team. We don't know what we're going to get. Do we know where everybody's going to slot in? Not at this point. The preseason will play out. We'll get into the regular season, and even when we cross that threshold, still won't know fully how this team will be assembled. Like there is a general excitement that is slowly building based around a new hockey season and the idea that the Leafs are pretty capable, and if things come together, should be amongst the top 10 teams in the league vying for more opportunity. But there's nothing that I'm excited to be surprised by at this point, other than Matthew Nyes all of a sudden turning out to be Cam Neely, right? I wouldn't say this is just more of the same, and that it's kind of mundane, but we're now expecting success like we've had for the better part of the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
It's just that the goal of a championship still seems so far away. It's hard to get yourself ramped up about something that we're not sure they can achieve, but we're pretty confident they'll put themselves in the mix to at least be amongst those who will be considered to be a champion. You know what I'm saying? There's not a massive amount of excitement, but we are anticipating in the same ways we have in the past, because we kind of know the guys we've got. Will they deliver? That remains to be seen. If they do, we'll see what we've seen. If they don't, then it makes for a real dramatic podcast every Sunday. Mike, OG's Converts, like the content, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you being here. Just a quick note about the chat. If you want me to read something, make it really concise and there's no grammatical errors, because I'm going through stuff right now and I don't understand what you're saying. So I can't pop it up because I'm going to misread it and misrepresent you. So quick and dirty, to the point, and I can share your commentary, because I'm reading what you're saying while listening to the sage, wise, omniscient Michael P. Augello. Mike, 5 minutes and let's get out of here. What else do you want to cram into the end of the show?
Well, in the comments, somebody was mentioning Bobby McMahon, and he's an interesting situation because he's 27 years old. He's played really well at the AHL level for 2 years, scored 20 goals both years. Got hurt last year in March, hurt his knee, couldn't play in the Calder Cup playoffs. Sheldon Keefe liked him. He liked the size that he brought. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. He was basically, when he was up last year, was a 4th line crash and banger. And that's, that has a role here. Because this team didn't have a ton of size last year. Now they have a little more snarl, but I do think that there's an outside chance that Bobby McMahon could end up being a 4th liner on this team. The dilemma here is he's still recovering from the injury. He's still not available at the beginning of training camp. He has to clear waivers to go down to the Marlies unless he goes down on a sort of injury recovery stint. If that's the case, then he doesn't have to go on waivers if he's going to make the team. But again, everything comes back to their cap situation. Now, he's a guy who's making less than $800,000, so plugging in a guy like him saves money on the cap. But the problem is that they're spending too much money in other places. So, can they sneak him down to the Marlies through waivers? Do they risk? They never seem to be able to sneak anybody through waivers. So that's there's too much attention on Toronto. And I do think that even though he's 27 years old, even though he's not proved that he could score at the NHL level, big players and players who crash and bang are valuable in this league. So do I think that if they try to sneak Bobby McMann through waivers, they're going to be able to? No, somebody will claim him. So if they want to keep him, then they may have to keep him through the beginning of the regular season, make sure that he's completely healthy, and then maybe by the time he is ready to come back, the cap issues have to be solved before October the 11th. That's the great question here. What are they going to do to get underneath the cap? Now, I'm speculating on this one thing because they have there is a cap on how much you can put on LTIR. You might see before the beginning of the regular season the rights to Jake Muzzin or the rights to Matt Murray traded. Because now, what does that do? Well, then they get underneath the cap of LTIR, because I think the cap is $10 million. And if another player has to go on LTIR, then they can put them there and get under the cap. The problem is that nobody's injured right now. And it's so really they have a problem where they have too much healthy players over the cap, and they have to rectify that. And I don't know, if it's going to be going with a 20-man roster, that they may be able to barely scratch underneath the cap, and that's all you really have to do. And then you can call up players with the injury waiver. Like if a player makes, I think it's less than $800,000, they can get called up as a backup or fill in if somebody else is hurt. But the whole problem is they have to get under $83.5 million, and they're spending too much money on forwards, and that's the issue. And
Mike, there's the business end of it, there's the hockey end of it, there's the mental health end of it. Just going to read some comments and we'll get out of here. Andrew, I was in London this summer. I wish someone told me the difference between the north and south side. I mean, London, Ontario? Really? I can't help you. Anybody else from London? Can you explain the territorial breakdown to Mr. Andrew? Colin M. Bobby McMahon's problem, much like Robertson, is that he consistently gets hurt. I think Robertson, as a Leaf, aspirations are fading. I read a comment from him where he's just like, I don't fucking care about what people think about my stature within the organization. I'm just going to go to work. Comment on Nick Robertson.
And that
he doesn't necessarily exude future star at this point based on the injuries and based on his kind of his own demotion through the ranking system right now. But is he another outlier who we should keep an eye on?
That's the attitude that Nick Robertson should have. Is right. I'm gonna screw all the people that doubt me. I'm just gonna go out and prove it.
Right.
I mean, I hope so. I like the kid. I think he's got immense talent. I think he's got NHL talent.
Right.
The problem is, does he have NHL durability? And that, he's been hurt now. He's had 3 major injuries in 3 years.
Right.
And that is I said last year when he got hurt, the problem is that he does not seem to have that innate sense of avoiding contact that Mitch Marner has. Mitch Marner is not a big player, but he has that ability to avoid contact and not take the big hit. And last year, I think it was Sean Walker from LA. It was a big defenseman who just walloped Robertson, and it ended his season. I think it was a separated or dislocated.
Nice too, and he's a big boy, right?
Right, but I'm not as concerned about that with Nice, because that was sort of a one-off. The injury last year in the playoffs. I mean, if that happens over and over again, then that's a concern. But with Robertson, he's been hurt. He's had a broken tibia. He's had a shoulder problem. He's had a knee problem. So I hope for his sake and for the Leafs' sake that he has success. I think what needs to happen, probably, unless there's an opening that I don't see, I think he's still waiver exempt. I think he goes down to the Marlies. I think he lights it up. He scores a bunch of goals. He's never had a problem scoring at the American Hockey League level. He stays healthy, and then he waits for his opportunity. But if he gets hurt again, and everybody who's doubting him, they're right, because he keeps getting hurt. I think he's an NHL player. I just don't know whether he can stay healthy enough to do it.
From stars to potential future stars, the Leafs aren't lacking, right? They're not lacking. So it's hard. It's hard to be really, really overly concerned and anxiety riddled by this team based on its roster. But as Brad Treliving said, and was pretty succinct, even though he was ambiguous in his answer, we'll see how it all plays out. Guys like McMahon and Robertson can take solace in the journey of a guy like Joseph Wall, coming through so many injuries and now putting himself in a position to succeed. The thing is, decent forwards are a dime a dozen. The good goaltenders aren't. So, I wish these guys the very best, and if they can slot it at some point and just go in and be a part of the team and contribute, I'm excited for that. I also want to see guys be put into positions where they can succeed, but you cannot be singularly dimensional. You have to have the ability to play a 200-foot game, all three zones, play defensively, play on the third line, play on the second line, play on the first line when need be. I'm just not a fan of players who are really, really slotted into one facet of capability. And that's been the criticism, and that's also been the hallmark of a guy like William Nylander. Just an offensive dynamo, leaves a lot to be desired in the other parts of the game. You can argue whether he's been getting better, and metrically, if there's support there, we can use that on his behalf. But here in this situation now, 10 years deep into to a pretty damn good career, how does he go to the next level? Not only for him, himself to embolden what he does to the organization and make it better, but down the line, if he's looking for a big payday with the Maple Leafs or with another crew or another organization, the more you can do, the more multifaceted you are, especially as you evolve throughout your NHL career. The more financial dividends and rewards you're going to see, as you get to that point where the next contract is a big determining factor of where you're going to be headed and how you're going to be compensated. Mike, I'm pretty much wrapped up for today. I don't know if you have anything else. Check out Mike's stuff at hockeybuzz.com. You can reach me at Norman Oakridge Ford on Instagram. Of course, season 6, TLC 6 is on the go, and we'll ramp up with more content as we get closer to the season. We have some polls in the community portion of the YouTube channel this week. Always available for interaction. You know how to get a hold of Mike. You know how to get a hold of me. And, slowly but surely, just like the Maple Leafs, we'll get into a groove and into a rhythm, and we're going to have a lot of fun in 23 and 24. Mike, unless you have something to say, I'm going to shut her down. For Mr. Augello, I'm Norm James. Appreciate all your support. Talk to you soon. The Leafs Convo is out.